My name is Jonathan Miles, I'm 62 years old. For nearly 30 years I was the Chief Financial Officer at Evermont Engineering, one of the largest manufacturing companies in Denver, Colorado. For 30 years I lived with spreadsheets, risk analysis, and million-dollar decisions. My life was discipline, responsibility, and math, but also quiet pride. What I did had meaning. In the company, they called me the soft power. I didn't make the loudest noise in meetings, but in a crisis, everyone looked to me. My calmness was like my brand. My business was driven by reason, not emotion. But behind the business, I always kept my real passion, my family. Victoria, to whom I have been married for over 30 years, and our children, Lucas and Isabella, were at the center of my life. Every promotion, every late night, every risky investment. It was all for them. When Lucas wanted to get his MBA at Stanford, I paid $45,000 without blinking an eye. When Isabella wanted to open her own boutique in Cherry Creek, I paid $110,000 and proudly supported her. For Victoria, the sky was the limit: trips to Europe, a new Lexus every year, lavish dinners, and finally our dream home in Maple Ridge. I always told myself, every dollar I earn is an investment that goes back to my family. Seeing them happy made all those long hours worthwhile. But I later learned that happiness built on money is a foundation that quietly decays. As my retirement approached, things began to change. Victoria was not as close as she used to be. She was always busy on the phone and stopped talking when I entered the room. Lucas started asking about my retirement plans, my investments, my inheritance. Even Isabella had recently been more interested in my future plans than my health. At first I didn't care. Maybe I'm being too delusional, I thought. But a restlessness began to grow inside me that I couldn't define. I kept saying to myself, Jonathan, don't be ridiculous. You're just tired. But something was whispering inside me, something is wrong. And the day came, my retirement party. We had a simple celebration in our garden. Family, a few close friends, a warm summer evening, lights strung on a tree, the smell of barbecue. As I looked at Victoria, glass in hand, I wanted to believe that everything was still okay. She was radiant that night. Victoria was elegant, confident. But that smile. I realized for the first time, it wasn't mine. The night was filled with memories of the past and the silent collapse of an unwitting future. I made a short speech, thanking everyone, referring to my family as my greatest achievement in life. If only I had known then. Because that night, under the lights in the garden, a silent storm had begun. My retirement party was supposed to be a celebration of 35 years of work. But that night, I lost everything. The night was drawing in. The sky had turned dark blue and there was light jazz music playing in the backyard. Victoria walked towards me with an envelope in her hand. She had a smile on her face, but it didn't reach her eyes. They were cold, as if rehearsed. Jonathan, she said softly, I have a retirement present for you. Around us everyone was laughing, drinking wine, talking about future vacations, grandchildren. As I held the envelope in my hand, a buzzing hum rose up inside me. I opened the envelope. Divorce papers. For a moment my brain went silent. The lights, the music, the people. Everything blurred. The words on the pages danced before my eyes. Disputes. Division of property. Alimony. I looked up. Victoria was still smiling. Why, was all I could say, hoarsely. She leaned into my ear. I don't want to spend the rest of my life looking after an old pensioner. You understand me, don't you, Jonathan? I had dedicated my life to being an ideal husband, an ideal father, and at the end of the day I was seen as an old pensioner who didn't want to be looked after, and when I realized that, I felt my heart could stop. Can you feel how heavy that is? I looked around, as if looking for something. Maybe a confused face, a look of pity, a look of support. But there was none. And then I saw them, Lucas and Isabella. They were standing at the edge of the garden, watching in silence. There was no surprise on their faces. They knew. You knew, I said in a calm voice. Lucas bowed his head, then looked at me. Dad. Mom deserves to be happy. You had a life and so should she. Isabella quickly intervened. Dad, we just want this process to go smoothly. After all, investments, accounts, company shares. It's all complicated. It was as if they were talking to a client, not their own father. They were treating my life, my efforts, my past like a file. I folded the documents, put them in my jacket pocket. Then I just said, all right. I didn't shout, I didn't argue, I didn't cry. I just kept quiet. Because some storms don't shout, they are born quietly. The rest of that night was a blur. At one point I heard Victoria laughing. There was a strange man with her. Tall, in an expensive suit, confident. He was so close. Too close. People still came up to me and said, Jonathan, we are so proud of you. And I would smile and nod, politely, habitually. But something was beginning to take shape inside me. Something sharp, cold, patient. A man who can manage a lifetime in numbers can plan a disappearance perfectly. That night I decided. I wasn't going to fight. I wasn't going to prove it. I didn't even want to win. I was just going to disappear. And everything they thought belonged to them, I would quietly take with me. 3 days after the party I signed the papers. No arguments, no tears, no scenes. Just a pen on paper and a 35-year marriage ended quietly. Victoria got the house in Maple Ridge, half of the joint accounts, and what she would call unfair alimony. Lucas and Isabella were left with some company stock and access to a small fund I had set up years ago. They thought they were the winners. With those fake smiles, they thought, the story is over. But for me, that was just the prologue. None of them knew, but I had been prepared for years for such an eventuality. The old cautious finance director was still inside me, and now it was his turn on stage. Over the years I had built a complex financial network. Shell companies, portfolios under different names, properties scattered across the states. I didn't just manage money, I made wealth invisible. Power and money don't disappear in the world, they just move, and I was an expert at seeing these places, as you will understand better towards the end of my story. The day after I signed the papers, I disappeared. No movie-like escape, no secret passports. Just silence. I canceled my phone line, closed my email and social media accounts. Then I got in my truck and drove west. I didn't have a plan, I had one rule: never look back. The road was getting longer, the sun was turning into a purple haze behind the mountains. For the first time in 30 years, I was following my own direction, not a calendar set before me. There were no meetings, no responsibilities, no expectations. 2 days later I arrived in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. A small cabin I had bought 6 months earlier under an assumed name, David Hale. 10 acres of pine forest, snowy peaks in the distance and an ear-splitting silence. I unpacked cardboard boxes, some clothes, my old laptop, a few essentials. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I didn't need marble countertops anymore, nor vanity, nor false happiness. The first night I sat on the porch and watched the stars. After years of noise, the silence was heavy, but there was peace in it. A fragile peace. But it was mine. Of course they called me. My old phone rang for days, messages came, emails flooded in. Jonathan, we need to discuss child support details. Victoria. Dad, where are you? We need to ask you a few questions about the company shares. Lucas. Dad, this is crazy. You can't disappear like this. Isabella. But I could. And I did. Weeks passed, months flowed. Seasons turned like the pages of a book no one had read. The man they knew was no more. The predictable, tired man, shackled by responsibility. In his place a new one was born. Not broken. Not angry. Just free. The first few months in Wyoming were unbearably quiet. The kind of silence that filled not only the room, but one's insides. I was not used to hearing my own breathing, the creaking of the boards. But in that silence, I found something I had lost years ago, myself. I established a routine. Waking up before sunrise. Black coffee without sugar or milk. A walk on the paths behind my cabin, the morning mist wandering through the trees like old memories. Then exercise, a simple, brutal discipline. Push-ups until my arms trembled, jogging on cold roads, meals made with my own hands, not from outside. The noise in my mind began to diminish. I was no longer CFO Jonathan Miles. I was a man who had walked out of his own wreckage. I started reading books again. But this time not reports, but books about people. Philosophy, history, psychology. The kind of pages where one confronts oneself. One day, I looked at my reflection in the window. My beard had grown, my eyes were clearer, more serene. I didn't recognize myself. But for the first time, I saw a man who really had control, not someone who pretended to have control. Then, suddenly, Grace came into my life. It was late fall, a cold morning. I had gone shopping in Jackson Hole, for groceries, some books, and for some reason a guitar. I saw her in the window of a small bookstore, Wild Pages. He was in his early 50s, silver-gray hair, peace in his eyes. Our first conversation was about books, Hemingway, Faulkner. Writers who understood broken people. An hour passed without me noticing. It was as if something frozen inside me was warming up again. Grace ran that bookstore by herself. She had been divorced years ago, no children, no chaos, just peace. And she said to me, "Your energy is different, Jonathan. It's like you've been through fire, but instead of burning you've turned into steel." What a marvelous expression, what a profound look. And he was right, I had been through hell, the hell created by those to whom I had offered a paradise, and it gave me my self-esteem again, because I saw that I could rebuild it. Months passed. Coffee conversations turned into dinners, dinners turned into weekends. We didn't fill the silence, we respected it. 8 months later we got married. It was a simple courthouse wedding. No crowds, no fancy rings, no speeches. Just 2 signatures, 2 witnesses, and a peace that required no proof. 6 months later Grace and I adopted Sophie, an 8-year-old girl with sparkling eyes. Her biological parents had lost custody of her years earlier. When she called me Dad for the first time, it was as if the universe had given me back the purest version of what I had lost. In the meantime, the numbers haunted me. I set up a small desk with 3 monitors in my hut. Satellite link, analysis charts, 30 years of experience. I started with small investments, stocks, emerging markets, technology companies. I had a friend named Abraham. He used to call me all the time and tell me that this project is going to do at least 50x, that project is going to do at least 100x, and I have allocated my entire portfolio to them. I would tell him that this is a possibility, but it is a 1% possibility and I will not run after it. Of course it would not make sense. So what did I do? I doubled my capital in 6 months. Tripled it in a year. While the vast majority were chasing the 1% chance of getting rich in meme projects, I was quietly realizing the 99% chance by creating ownership in quality assets. I was finding the stars in the sectors where money transfers take place in the world and positioning myself there, strengthening my position. And now my passive income was 2 times my old CFO salary. I was no longer using money to buy peace, but to live peace. You know the difference, right? For years passed quietly, like the wind blowing over the Wyoming hills. My life was simpler now, coffee with Grace in the morning, Sophie's laughter, watching the sun melt behind the mountains in the evening. For the first time in 30 years, the days were unhurried, just living. One morning, the phone rang. It was Mr. Carlyle. "Jonathan," he said in a cautious voice, "your ex-wife has contacted me. She wants to renegotiate the alimony terms." Let me guess, I said, she's broke, right? Yes, he said. But that's not the point. That man she dumped you for, Derek Vaughn, was actually a con man. He took about $250,000 and disappeared. Her words didn't surprise me. Greed brings its own punishment. Carlyle continued. Your kids aren't doing well either. Lucas invested in a crypto company that said it would revolutionize digital payments. The company went under overnight. He lost about $400,000. Isabella's boutique chain also went bankrupt. She grew too fast, took on too much debt. Now she's over $200,000 in debt. I looked out the window. Grace and Sophie were laughing as they tended the horses. The wind carried their voices across the valley. Now, that was real wealth. Mr. Carlyle, I said with quiet determination. If they call me, tell them that Jonathan Miles no longer wants to be contacted. If they insist, you handle the legal process. He was silent for a moment. Jonathan. They are desperate. I know, I said in a calm voice. That was the intention. Months passed. Carlyle became my eyes in Denver. Each call was like a new page in a story I had written years ago, they were just playing out the ending. Victoria lost the house in Maple Ridge, she said one afternoon. Now she lives in a small apartment in Aurora. When Derek disappeared, she tried to sell her jewelry, but most of it was fake. She pawned the rest for next to nothing. I just felt a quiet peace, the peace of the moment when life finds its balance. Lucas had to sell his car, Carlyle added. Isabella lives with her mom. They're struggling to pay the rent. Those who had once been the strongest were now crushed under the weight of their own choices. I didn't have to do anything. They had written their own fate. For years I had shouldered their needs, their comforts, their ambitions. Now there was no burden on my shoulders. I remembered the night of the party. I remembered their cold stares, the way they treated me like a useless burden. Now I am a ghost in their story, silent, unreachable, but present. Sometimes revenge is not taken with fire. Sometimes it is taken only with distance and time. Sitting by the fireplace that winter evening, the snow was falling silently outside. Grace was reading, Sophie was asleep on the couch. And in that moment I realized. It wasn't money they had lost. What they lost was access. My time, my love, my protection. Access to a man who had once given them everything was now closed forever. That was the true price of betrayal. 5 years had passed since my disappearance. Peace had become the natural state of my life. Our home in Wyoming was a sprawling 600 acres overlooking the snow-capped Teton Mountains. Each sunrise was like a reward for my survival. That morning Grace was in the kitchen making pancakes and humming a song. Sophie was playing the piano in the living room, a Chopin piece she had been practicing for weeks for her school recital. The phone rang. It was Mr. Carlyle again. Jonathan, he said in an agitated voice, I have to tell you. Victoria is in the hospital. Severe anxiety, depression, financial difficulties. I didn't react at all. No anger, no satisfaction. Just the silence behind a door that had closed long ago. What about the kids? I said. Lucas called me yesterday. He begs to talk to you for 5 minutes before he loses his house. Isabella came to my office. We understand now, she said. It's not about money, it's about respect. Respect. The word they forgot years ago. I looked out the window. Grace was smiling at me. Sophie waved from the piano. Mr. Carlyle, I said, write a letter. 3 copies. Send it to all of them. While he wrote, I dictated. Dear Victoria, Lucas and Isabella. The man before betrayal no longer exists. His replacement remembers everything. You saw me not as a person, but as a bank account. You miscalculated my worth. There will be no second chance, no reconciliation, no rescue. You made your choices based on greed and comfort. Now learn to live with those choices. Sincerely, Jonathan Miles. One more thing, I said, add a photo. That afternoon, Grace, Sophie, and I had our picture taken in front of our house. A modern cottage made of stone and cedar, the vast valley behind us. Our horses nearby, the small plane we used for weekend trips in the parking lot. We were smiling, not out of revenge, but because we had found balance. On the back of the photo, in my own handwriting, I wrote the following. Miles Family, Wyoming, 2024. Built with love, not money. 3 weeks later Carlisle called again. Jonathan, your letter was a big hit. Victoria called 40 times in one day. Lucas sent a 12-page letter, more of a confession than an apology. Isabella came to my office. Her eyes were full. Tell him, he said. He won. We finally understand. Jonathan, Carlisle said, do you feel satisfaction? I thought for a while. No, I said, satisfaction is temporary. For years I carried anger like a stone in my chest. Not now. Not because they suffered. But because I have built something better. Well, he said slowly, will you ever see them again? Family is not defined by blood, I said. It is defined by choices. Grace chooses me every morning. Sophie calls me Dad because she feels that way. This is family. The others have made their own choices. 6 months later came the final report. Victoria had moved into a state-funded nursing home. Lucas had started working as an accountant in a small company. Isabella had decided to study teaching. They were alive. That was enough. Today I am 67 years old. Every morning I wake up with laughter, with light, with love. Sophie turned 15, she won a scholarship on her own. Grace expanded her bookstore to 3 cities. Me? I have never felt so rich, not in money, but in peace. People always say that revenge demands destruction. They are wrong. The real revenge is to create. You build a life in such a way that those who tried to destroy you no longer matter. And looking at the Wyoming horizon, I realized. True closure is not forgiveness, but indifference born of happiness. Thank you for staying with me through my story. If these words touched you, if they stirred something in you or made you reflect on your own journey, I ask only 3 small things. Like the video so others can find it. Leave a comment, share your story, or simply tell me what struck you the hardest. Subscribe because more stories are coming, and you won't want to miss what's ahead.